This is Basket Case Clubs, CPR Group's podcast where we turn basket case clubs into showcase clubs. Hello everyone and welcome back to Basket Case Clubs, where we're going to take you on another journey of basket casey goodness to finish off our mini-series / mega series on strategic planning. My name's Michael Connolly and it is my very great pleasure to be your host again on Basket Case Clubs. Joining me as usual is my, what am I going to say this
Brother
time?
in crime. Brother in crime.
Is my devilishly handsome and clever brother, Steve Connolly. G'day, Steve. How you doing?
Hey, devilishly handsome and clever.
And
Woohoo.
you owe me for that one.
Does that
And
make me
it was public.
does that make me a double threat?
What-
What the pleasure is all mine. Thanks for having me again. Wait, are we finished? It sounds like
See
I'm
ya.
finishing.
What's the triple threat in musical theatre? Sing, dance, and act.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've seen you dance, Steve. You ain't no triple threat.
That's all
I
in the
can't
hips.
dance. Yeah, I'm really. Yeah, no. I'm thinking that you've probably got a few friends, if any of your friends who came to think, I don't know, like your wedding where you got to do a dance and have seen you dance. You know, you got the
Yeah.
white man overbite going on.
Yeah.
Oh,
Good. God, we deviate before we even get we don't even get on the track before we get off the track. That's why we're better than your other podcasts that you might be listening to, folks.
You folked again.
I did folked.
So yeah, we got to get on the beaten track before we can get off it.
Hey,
yes.
that's a great segue into our, staying on the beaten track.
Keep going. I'm interested to see where this is going.
It's not going to get
An
us back onto
inverted
the track.
segue. Hang on, you can't get back onto something you were never on in the first place.
Talking about planning and stuff.
Yeah, the final episode. So what I thought we'd do, Steve, is do a bit of a recap of the stuff that we've been through, plus then wrap it all up into converting the strategic plan into operations. And we have touched on this a little bit when we talked about the action plan and pulling it all together and who's going to do what by when to make sure that shit actually happens. And that's the thing that often plays an important part in strategic planning is, you get excitement at the time, you get people thinking, yes, we can do this. And then they leave the whole process behind and get back to work. And it's just BAU that takes over and you've got the same old fights and the same old problems and the same old beating your head against what you think is a problem from council and saying council never does anything for us, being hang on a minute, look at what you're getting as far as your lease goes, and all of those sorts of things get back in the way. And you get busy being busy and you kind of think to yourself, oh, we'll get to that strategic plan when we finish this, or I'll just finish this and then we'll get on to, and that is just, it never happens. In fact, I've got a story.
There's so many thises. There's a never-ending list of thises.
Oh, I like that. You should put that on a t-shirt. The never-ending list of thises. It gets in the way. I don't think it'll work. People would look at your shirt and go, yeah, maybe you shouldn't have worn that one. So what
Makes me the master procrastinator.
Yep. For those listening, you didn't see the face when Steve worked out how that would become a portmanteau. Anyway, we'll leave that one just hanging. So I want to tell you a story about this whole procrastinating on the strategic stuff. A few years ago, I worked with the Netball Association. I won't say which one because I want to stay friends with them. And in going, they'll know. In going through their minutes from board meetings, this is the snooping that I like to do to get a good understanding. And I went through and I saw the final 5 or 6 items on the agenda were all their strategic goals. I thought, well, this is fantastic. As I'm looking at agendas, going, this is fantastic. They're on there every single time, and they're in the same order. And then you look at the minutes. Why did I say merits? You look at the minutes from
judging the minutes on their merits.
Hey, that'll do. Thank you. I'll take that one. I'm looking at the minutes, and the meritable minutes. And every time they get up to that part of the meeting, they do general business and then it's 11 o'clock at night and it says meeting adjourned due to lack of time, strategic issues deferred to next meeting, every single meeting. So they looked at them but they never talked about them. And so when you come up with plans, and this is why, remember we talked about in goal setting that you've got to have the big goals and you've got to get the dopamine hits by moving towards your goals and seeing your progress, but you've got to be able to chunk it down into bite-sized chunks so that you can take meaningful steps that move you in the right direction, because otherwise it can end up being overwhelming, and you can look at it and say, well, that's never going to happen because I've got these 3 tribunal things, and the cost of the soft drink that we put in the fridge has gone up, and we've got this push to have healthy food in the canteen, and that's going to take a whole heap of time, and blah, 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 back to not doing anything. And then 3 years later, we come back, and guess what? We look at we've got time to do strategic planning review, and we look at our old and go, oh, well, let's just, I think I've said
we've already got one.
Roll that over. Yeah, let's cross the dates out, put in the next date. Well, there we go, done. Yes, so this is all about actually turning your strategic plan into actually something that you can then put into practice. So let's go through and recap what we learned. Steve, I'm going to see if you've been doing your homework and see if you can take us on a bit of a recap for what you think we should cover.
You're always putting me on the spot, calling on my memory, which is, I don't think it's as good as it used to be. I can't quite remember. So we talked about identifying who your club really is. Why do you exist? We talked about missions and visions, and
how not to keep them wanky.
How not to keep them wanky. And I think we probably picked on them a little bit because they are so often wanky. And for that reason, we like to delve into that discussion in a somewhat different way by challenging people in an organization to ask themselves why they became involved, because there's a pretty good indicator through that discussion of why others might be getting involved in the organization, and that can then lead to some clarity around why the organization exists itself. And then we started to nut out how to set your goals, and I think we had a good discussion about Anzac Bickies, action planning,
hungry again,
and really importantly, then exploring some of the do's and don'ts, I suppose, of consultation and taking the right approach to meaningfully engaging your members and maybe other stakeholders to have input and buy into your planning documentation.
Yep. And speaking of food, obviously there was the whole Ben and Jerry's discussion as well, and looking at values. And remember, we revisited that one, and remember that I then went and bought a half a litre tub of Ben and Jerry's chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream, and I think
I've suffered the shakes all night.
No, you can't eat much of it. Like you get that when you have far too much sugar and you just go, oh my God, I might say just a little bit, but I hide it in the freezer so nobody knows where it is. It lasts me for months.
Yeah, because no one else knows where it is. And as hey, I wonder, I've got 2 things that I have to say, and I need to try not to forget either of them. I wonder if your Ben and Jerry's ice cream, it's a little bit like, when you got young kids who are getting to the age where they want to start experimenting drinking alcohol. So they take the bottle of rum or the bottle of whiskey and they drink some, but then they top it back up with some watered, quite watery tea or something. I wonder if you've got that going on with your ice cream. People are eating the really good Ben and Jerry's ice cream and topping it up with shit.
Hopefully not with shit, but maybe with home brand, some no-name brand ice cream.
Yeah.
Mixing it in and stirring it and then patting it down on the top.
Yes. Yep.
Look, I eat ice cream so infrequently, I probably wouldn't notice.
You probably wouldn't notice. That's right. And it's still going to be full of sugar. But the Ben and Jerry's so salty as well. But that was really interesting just in terms of an organization being really clear on its purpose, just to that discussion that I was pointing back to a moment earlier in terms of why an organization exists. And what fascinated me about that story that you told about Ben and Jerry's was how the legacy of the organization through the contractual documentation or, whatever it was, enforced that those objects, to use a term with which our listeners will be familiar, were enshrined in the organization's operations, even post-sale. Fascinating.
Yeah. Yep. So now we've got to put it all into practice. So strategic planning is about looking over the horizon. It's about the long term and where we want to be. And so really it's I suppose we could look at it like the map, and then to get there, we're still going to need the vehicle. So we've still got to put fuel in the vehicle, which means we've got to have enough money, and we've still got to make sure that we're watching the map to make sure we're getting in the right direction. But each little trip that you take needs to be going in the right direction. So the overall strategic plan sets out that direction and says that's where we're going. And then, yeah, okay, you'll get back into business as usual, and that's fine. But you've always got to just keep looking up to say, okay, are we still heading in the right direction? And in your committee meetings, are these decisions that we're making going to get us to where we want to go? So we've now set where we want to go. The little day-to-day decisions, we've got to keep that in mind. So I don't think that the Netball Association should have necessarily considered those strategic things in isolation from everything else. You can actually use it as a bit of a test to say, well, we went to the effort to put this whole plan together. Let's now test every decision that we make to say, okay, are we going to run this new program? Well, we talked about, I think, in the goal setting, increasing from, what was it, 600 to 1200, or I think it was 1200. If we're trying to increase from 600 to 1200, will doing this new program enable us to do that? And then you probably say, well, yes, actually it would, but then it might give you some more flesh to put on the bones to say, okay, well, in putting this program together, then we don't want this to be just flash in the pan, come and have 6 touch points with us and then leave. It's more about how we manufacture a whole marketing effort around the program, so that we're encouraging people who take part in that program to not just stay for that and then go, but then to say, well, look at what else being involved with us long-term looks like. And that's really where the operationalizing of the plan comes from. Because I don't want to read a plan that's really long. And you remember we've both read and probably written some plans that were too long, where you're trying to put too much detail in. Too much means that we're making the cognitive load far too heavy for people and they just can't carry it. So they put the whole thing down and they throw the baby out with the bathwater. How's that for a bunch of mixed metaphors? We should count them. But you want the strategic plan to be fairly high level, not too detailed. But then when you need that level of detail, when do you do it? So the best way to do operational planning is probably annually. And we talk about a strategic plan. A lot of people say, "Oh, have you got your 5-year plan? Have you got your 5-year?" So much changes in community sport and community organisations in 5 years that we prefer to work to a 3-year time horizon. You can have your longer term goals, absolutely have them written down, because some of the things that you should be striving towards will be a decade down the road, and it's important to have them documented, but you keep them there. You just make sure you keep working towards them. So if that's the big one, is you're redoing that every 3 years, it's every year then you're saying, okay, so to achieve these goals, under each of these goals, what are we actually going to do this year? And then you're basically taking the action plan and adding more to it. It still doesn't need to be hugely detailed. So if your action plan, let's say we've got those 5 ingredients for our Anzac cookies and we've got our 5 goals, and under each of those goals, there might be, in the action plan, there might be 3, 4, 5 action, probably only 3. And sometimes, and that might be enough. You don't need heaps. But then each of those 3 get broken down into, what are we doing this year to achieve these? And then every month, that's what you're looking at. Every month, you're saying, okay, so do we need to be doing something this month on that? So the operational plan will say, well, you need to be doing, and again, it doesn't need to be hugely complex. A fairly simple spreadsheet will do it. And you can do that as a Google Sheet or an Excel workbook or whatever. You can have tabs, it doesn't matter, but tabulating it like that actually probably makes it nice and easy, because you can then look and say, well, all right, well, it's March and it said we should be starting this by March. There's our agenda, man. If we've got that good separation of governance and operations, and we've got a committee or a board who can focus on the big picture, boom, there it is. It's all written down.
I like the idea of, just further to what you were saying about doing that operational planning each year and bringing your strategic plan to life through that process. I like to suggest taking that operational planning process as an opportunity to do your budgeting.
Yes. Yep. So we'll work through that. What are you putting in that budget then?
Well, if any of the things that you're going to be looking to deliver through your operational plan are going to cost you money, where's the money going to come from? And that then actually works together quite nicely to potentially support you in identifying initiatives in your operational plan that are going to make money, not just cost money.
Yep.
Also, and we've talked about budgeting in the past in the podcast, and really the importance of not just looking at what you charged last year in terms of setting your pricing strategy, but considering all of the costs of doing business, so the BAU or business as usual activities, but then what's it going to cost to deliver those initiatives identified in your action plan, your operational plan, and really nutting out what income you're going to need to generate to cover the costs of those initiatives and ongoing activities.
Yeah, because there's nothing, well, there's a lot worse, but it's a bad thing to have great goals that have no link to actually putting that fuel in the tank to make
as
sure
we've
that you
said,
can get there.
And as we've said in the past, that's so common that an organization will do its planning and they'll come up with great ideas, but there's no link there to budgeting. There's no connection to how you're actually going to make that shit work.
It's a really good point, Steve, and I'm glad that you brought it up because it's so easy it's easy in business, but it's especially easy in the community sector to say, well, we don't exist to make money. After all, we're not for profit. And yes, we've rattled on about that a fair bit. And to live on purpose. And we've spoken, even the Ben & Jerry's thing, we've spoken so much about purpose and being clear on purpose and living on purpose and volunteering on purpose and running your organizations on purpose that you can say, well, this is all about purpose. But if you don't have money, you can't deliver that purpose. So you've got to make sure that you've got that link back to making enough money to actually be able to do the things that you want to do.
Yes.
So you're going to run into trouble, though. This is where, when you're actually putting the rubber to the road, this is where you're going to start to face some challenges because there will be people, and let's just point to the elephant in the room first. The challenges the most of the challenges you're going to have are going to be people-based. So you're going to have some people who might have been happy to coast and just, ride the gravy train and everything's easy and I look good. And some of these people might be in positions of leadership, so-called leadership, but they're nest feathering or they're in it for the wrong reasons. And by now having to be held accountable, I know some councils that won't do good planning because they don't want to, the councils don't want to be held to account for not delivering something that they said they would because they want to be able to change their mind next election. So you might have some coasters who just want to look good but don't actually want to do any work. And so the planning process is a bit of a delay for them. But then when it gets to operational planning and they've actually got to do things and they've got to write things down and have accountability, they've got to be held to account on what they've got to do. They just then start to, and then it can actually lead to conscious or subconscious sabotage. They can actually undermine what you're trying to achieve. So, oh, look, I knew that wasn't going to work. So it turns out that what we've been doing all along was actually better and we should have just stuck to that. Every time I do those voices, Steve, I'd look at your face and you go, hey, I know who you're talking. I know who you're mimicking then. No, it's more than one.
Not the Mad Hatters, the Red Hatters.
Yes. Yeah, no. And the other thing that can happen is that we talked about in goal setting again. Once we've set this bus off in the direction that we now know we're going, it's actually it's this shit got real syndrome. As we actually start to move in a direction that furthers now that we've written it down, what our purpose is, what sort of a club are we, and we start to explore that, we start to push down that road, it makes people uncomfortable to the point where you might have some volunteers who say, or staff members who say, well, this isn't actually for me. And I don't want to be on. So those are some of the challenges. And look, to be honest, they are rare. It's just that we've done, 10,000 or more, we've worked with 10,000 or more clubs. So we know what can happen. And okay, that's probably at one of the pointy ends of the bell curve. But it's important to keep in mind that you might have that because it's interesting. And then if you start to see some of that behavior, you'll say, why aren't these things working? And you're looking over your shoulder and looking around and seeing other people not necessarily pulling their weight or subconsciously pulling in a different direction or trying to stick with the old way, that we do it like that because that's how we've always done it. And it was me who set that up, by the way, so I don't want to change because it'll make me look bad. And even if it's not making me look bad, you looking good makes me look bad. That's how at least it feels. So it's at least important to have these things in mind. So don't let it, understand that you can have some hurdles or challenges like this, but they're just natural. They're going to be a challenge. Another one obviously is money, Steve, as you mentioned. So having enough money to be able to do what you want, all of that, these are things that can get in the way. Don't be disheartened if they do. Just be aware. Deal with it sensitively, build those relationships, and then move on. So we've already talked then about the next step, which is, okay, so we've got it going. How often do you look at it? Well, it's kind of all the time, really, isn't it?
It's an interesting question that often gets asked of us. How regularly should we refer to our strategic plan? And some clubs, one rugby club in particular that we've worked with for many years, you'll probably know who I'm talking about, Mick. They would pull the strategic plan out at their operations manager would pull the strategic plan out at every board meeting and make sure that the decision, he would sit there during the meeting and not necessarily interject, but would ensure that the discussions and the decisions that were being made were in alignment with the strategic plan, and would sometimes even create links for himself that he'd then share with the board between the actions and decisions coming out of meetings and where they fit within the strategic plan. So that's very much an organization that was living and breathing their strategic plan. But that's not necessarily the must do approach. And other organizations will refer to their strategic plan successfully a few times each year. Obviously, if an organization takes their strategic plan and operationalizes the action plan within it into an operational plan, and they are then using that document. And so if you have an operational plan, then my take on that is that it should be reviewed or at least monitored every board meeting. It's the sort of document that really you need to monitor more closely than probably your strategic plan. But at least a few times each year, you really should be pulling your strategic plan out at a board meeting. Even, the example that I gave last episode or a couple of episodes ago about the gymnastics club that had the strategic planning one-page pretty picture with all of the strategic goals up next to the canteen, or the cafe. So when you were lining up to order your cake and coffee, you would read the strategic plan, and it's a great way to pass your time in the line.
And it's not just the committee or board members doing it, it's everyone.
That's exactly right. So everyone has an opportunity to read and engage with that plan, but importantly, to live it and breathe it and to help with the achievement of the goals that it sets out.
Yep.
So again, to reflect on the last episode, it depends how regularly you should be pulling your plan out. However, it absolutely, as you just outlined earlier, do not write a strategic plan that is for a 3 or 5 year period and allow it to just sit in the drawer or the virtual file until it's time to review that document.
Yep. And it doesn't just need to be, as you said, doesn't just need to be the committee or board. If everyone's looking at it, everyone's got an idea. But if your operational plan in particular is 1, 2, or 3 pages of tables, then that's pretty easy to read and it's pretty easy to draw a link back. But as you were talking about the rugby club, Steve, it's interesting because it then drew a parallel that in local government, certainly in Queensland and in New South Wales, and what they've got to do is they've got to do an annual plan. So that plan can be called a corporate plan or a council plan or something similar, or a strategic plan. And then legislatively, they've got to align all of their initiatives against that plan. So that's exactly what you're talking about. Does doing this project, does investing in this way, in this initiative, in this infrastructure, in this facility, in this program, does it link back to what we said we would do? And so when you look at the strategic objectives in those sorts of plans, they are pretty motherhoody, and that's okay. But what we're talking about here, because our budgets are smaller and we are connected with a much smaller community, it's pretty easy to be able to connect everything back. But if you can't, if you don't want your statement so motherhoody that you can just connect everything to it, we're going to do everything that's all about sport. And okay, well, right, good. And then you can do anything that's anything to do with sport and justify it, but it's not necessarily furthering your purpose. So if you're clear on your purpose and you've then got goals that sit nicely underneath that, you can check things against it on a regular basis, and it's easy to do and it's easy to follow, and it's those sorts of plans, Steve, that are actually going to get done. And there's nothing. No, there are things better. I was going to say there's nothing worse. There's nothing, but there are things better. It's a really good thing when we're working with a group for the subsequent time. The second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever it is, 10th time probably for that rugby club. And to be able to go, you know what? These things are things that have now happened. There are facilities that have been built. There are segments of the community that weren't engaged in sport who are now engaged, and you're doing that. There is funding that you've been able to secure. There's programs that you're running. There's expansion. There's growth. You're watching yourself move along the trajectory. If this club that might have set themselves that doubling from 600 to 1,200. even though they might not make it to 1200, don't just look at that horizon and say, oh, we failed. Turn around and look over your shoulder and say, gee, we've come a long way. Look at what we've been able to achieve in the last 3 years. And that in itself is such an amazing boost for what you can put in the next plan, to say, well, now I'm energized. We have actually done things. We are genuinely doing well because we set a plan. We took stock of where we were. We know where we were. We've set out with some big goals, and then we've set out some steps to achieve them. Some of those steps had to change over time, and we needed to make some pretty big tweaks to the operational plan from year to year. But look at what we've achieved. And now, and the world around us might have changed a little bit. So we can say, okay, we'll take into account where we are in our operating environment now and our audience at the moment. Let's now do this again. And let's take our goals that are, those longer term ones. And if it was 10 years before, then after 3 years, shouldn't it be 7 years now? Are we still on track? So you're then seeing, it's like the tree in the distance. You're getting that dopamine hit and saying, oh, we are actually getting close to this. And you feel, and even as an outsider in those meetings, it's so wonderful that it's just like, it's electric.
And if that, you mentioned how rewarding it is for us with those organizations that we've been working with for several iterations of their plan, to see some of particularly the big ticket items, but also the cultural shift in some of those organizations that they've been able to achieve. So just, imagine how rewarding it is for the volunteers on the ground who have actually done the doing to achieve those outcomes.
Yeah. And then celebrate that. Sing it from the rooftop, include it in your annual dinner, include it in your presentation day, include it in your annual report, include it at your AGM, celebrate the volunteers who've worked on it, celebrate the staff members who've driven it.
That's probably an important inclusion in this discussion as well, is to actually make sure you take time to stop and smell the roses and to celebrate the achievements that you do make in your organization, because so often, we have talked about volunteering being a pretty thankless task sometimes, a lot of the time. And it is important for those volunteers and other members in the organization to recognize when they do achieve some great stuff and to, like you say, celebrate it at every opportunity you get.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, really good point. And nobody else is going to do it, Steve. So we might as well do a really good job celebrating our successes. Well, now it's time to put it into practice. So you've heard, what are we, 9 episodes, I think, of strategic planning. So there's no stone unturned here, people. Come on, go and get into it. My final word, Steve, and you can think of what yours is just get it going. Don't try and overcomplicate the process. And we've broken it down into more steps because we've revisited some stuff, and we've certainly the Ben and Jerry's things, and we spent a bit of time in those areas. But you don't have to get all of that right in one go. You can have a crack. You can, and your mission and your purpose statement might take 6 months to get right. It might take longer than a year to get right. Just keep working at it, but have a crack and then move on. But just get going. Don't overcomplicate it. Like I've said many times, if you have a napkin sitting next to you, or a coaster sitting next to you on a dry bar at a bar, then, and you scribble some stuff down on there and you've got a bit of a plan. If you're actually going to do that, that plan is better than the prettiest, longest plan that one of the big 4 consultancies in the country that might get into trouble and charge you hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not billions of dollars to do. It's more value than that could ever bring, because you're actually going to do it. It's not just crap on a page. It's stuff that you believe in. It's got your emotion in it. You've certainly got your emotional energy that you've put into it. Just get something down, and then it's because it's written down that then people can see it. You can all see progress towards it. You keep getting those dopamine hits all along the journey. By the time you get around to doing it again, you know that we can do stuff, and then those big goals that you set at the beginning, you can even get more audacious down the track as you're getting into it for the subsequent times as well.
Yeah, and so when you were saying in summarizing, how to actually get into it, and just a moment ago saying, don't hold back, don't be, kind of afraid to just launch into the planning process. I was going to say where you then went, which is just start with something simple. A really basic 1-page document is absolutely sufficient, because the likelihood of you actually achieving that stuff is far better than a really lengthy, pretty document that has lots of words in it that are very unlikely to ever be read by somebody.
Yep.
And the other thing that somewhat feeds into that is, as we've discussed through this mega series, often when we work with a club to prepare a strategic plan, a really good starting point is just documenting the ideas that they've already got. So, all of our listeners out there can maybe even start by following a process that you talked through earlier with that netball association, and have a look back through your last 6 board meeting minutes and identify the agreed actions or decisions that you made that led to some desirable outcome, and bring those into one central document. And that can form a really good starting point for your strategic plan. And then, as we've discussed, employing the right consultation ideas to engage people in meaningful ways and to gather their input so that they have some ownership over that document. But really, I think the big takeaway for me is just keep it as simple and succinct as you possibly can, because the length of your strategic plan is directly disproportionate to the likelihood of the shit in it getting done. So the shorter the plan, the more likely it is you're going to get the stuff done.
What did Doc Emmett Brown draw the original design for the flux capacitor on once I think he was standing on the toilet to change a light in the bathroom? It's a Back to the Future question, Steve.
Toilet paper?
Maybe I don't. Maybe.
It wasn't a rhetorical question.
I don't.
Hey, I've already told you I've got a shit memory, man. I'm not going to remember.
You went straight to toilet paper. I don't remember. But yeah, it's just get it down. So look, the flip side of this is obviously
just get it out. Great toilet analogy. Oh gosh, toilet humor.
The flip side of this is obviously that getting the drive to do it and seeing the forest for the trees is sometimes where it's actually really critical that you get somebody from the outside to do it. So we've talked about a lot of the planning processes that we've been involved in and that we've driven. Obviously, unashamed plug. This is what we do at CPR Group. And it's not about us being good at it. What we think we're good at is finding in everybody the spark of motivation that they want to do a great job in planning and they want to be involved, and that's what we draw at. And sometimes it's the BAU or just being at a place where the phone's going to ring and people are going to come and buy something that distracts you from being able to get really creative in what you're doing. Like when we talked about drawing pictures, yes, do that, but embrace that creativity. And sometimes you absolutely need external people. Steve, you know how many people that we lean on a daily basis, because I know that we can't see the forest for the trees. When I want to innovate some process that we're doing or we're putting into place, then I'm going to go and see. It was only as recently as yesterday that I went and sought advice. And yeah, we pay for this guidance because we know that we can't do it as well as everyone else. You don't service your own car. You get a professional to do it. You don't do, you can paint your house, but we all know how much of a shit job that is. So we get people who are really good at it and do it quickly and know that they're going to do a thorough job. So look at everything you do in your club and organization in the same way. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to pay for that help, because it's not a cost. It's an investment. And absolutely, as we've just talked about, all of these groups that we talk about get a return on that investment. And it's more than just the feeling of excitement and looking forward to doing things. It's actually getting stuff done and getting big things achieved. So definitely contact us for further advice and guidance. But look, sometimes it's just a matter of saying, hey, can you come and help us with this? And we absolutely love doing it. Yes. Steve, as usual, it's been a pleasure sometimes talking at you, sometimes talking with you in this podcast series. I've really enjoyed it. It's so much fun and it's so valuable. And when you take the time, as we've certainly done with this series,
quite a bit of time, yeah.
You get so much out of it, and it's so valuable. But yeah, that from the very first day, if you sit down and you come up with some ideas on the first day, don't wait until the plan's finished 9 months later. Because it's taken you 9 months to finish writing your mission statement. Just start doing things and see get some of those little wins under your belt. Obviously, if you're not already following us on social media, do so. If you've not signed up to our newsletter, make sure you sign up to our newsletter. You can contact us via our website. There's a little contact us button. And I think last time I tried to remember our 1-800 number and did get it right, but there's also a contact us button where you can send us a message or call us directly from our website at cprgroup.com.au. It's been great talking to you, Steve. I look forward to we've got some great interviews coming up, some really exciting things, talking about some groups that have had some great successes in the face of some pretty shitful situations around them as well. So genuinely back into the Basket Casey goodness next time. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Likewise. Thanks, Mick. Bye.
Basket Case Clubs acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country on which we record, being Yugambeh, Turrbal, Jagera and Kabi Kabi land. We recognise their enduring connection to land, waters and culture, and pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to First Nations listeners.